buffets, went to a theater production, and that $50 we still couldn't spend it all that day. That was very
I have a question. Okay, going back to with the man at the church, the Polish man at the church, and how like that was so like that stood out for you throughout like your entire trip. Is that like this one guy that he wasn't a tour guide, he wasn't anything. He was just this guy. He was there and he went over and he made a real impact on your trip. Do you think that like it's better when you go onto a trip? Like if you go to Europe, is it better to go for like the tours, like with the designated tour guides who know what to say, you know all the facts, whatever? Or is it better to kind of go explore on your own and go try and seek out people or have them seek out you who can like give you a different perspective that's not the tour guide, that's more of how it really is? Like, which do you like?
Well, one of the things that back then when you would travel, there would be the tour guide books. Nowadays it's probably Rick Steves, and back then there was this book published by Harvard Publishing called Let's Go, and it had a lot of info on inexpensive places to stay and things like that. So you were kind of guided into some of the functional things you needed to know. But you should always bring with you, and that's why I think that sometimes going to travel when you haven't studied enough, it's kind of wasted. Then you might just spend all days going to the zoo or something. But with a little bit of study and a lot of our history, and one of the things about studying our history is no matter where you go in the great cities of the world, there are things that you know and you've learned and you recognize, and you can just walk along and you don't have to be shown something. And one of the things I remember about being in Rome is walking away from the train station. I saw this church, and the facade was real familiar to me because it undulated. It was very Baroque, the way it undulated. And I remember thinking, I remember studying a church like that, but it can't be this one because there's no famous church here. And it turns out it was that church. There are so many monuments that they're just not everything. It has a fuzzy rope leading to it and a red carpet to show you where to go. So you have to find a lot of things on your own. I had a friend who thought going to Europe by way of a tour was the best way to go. He thought that, because he was in college, and he thought taking one of those tours would be great. And it turned out that he and his friend were the youngest on the tour by 45 years. So that wasn't the way to go.
Senior citizens.
Yes.
Well, so you think you find that that's the better way to go? Like, did you feel like you get more out of it that way than just from going from a tour?
Well, going from a tour. Now, if you go in a study abroad program, you're obviously taking classes while you're there. So you're immersed in a certain type of study. So you're going to be focusing on a certain type of area of study while you're there. But as a broader person, you should be aware of all sorts of things. If you're there studying art history, there's other things you should know about, whether it's food or gastronomy or architecture or cultural things, knowing that like the week you're there, maybe a great bike race. You should go check that out too.
Tour de France maybe just passing by.
Yeah, of course that's in July, and I would never be there in July. April and September, October are the best times to go.
Okay, so do you regret not going there to study abroad, or do you think that it was just as good going as a
going by yourself? Sometimes you do have certain, you feel like you like to share it with people. One of the things about studying abroad is you do have that experience of you're bonding with a group of people, and you're going to be able to always have that in those memories. You can, and as you get older, sometimes you forget a few things, but you can always be reminded of these things with the friends that you meet there.
Do you think that, I've seen the movie Taken, that always seems like a big concern. My mom always warns me, don't meet foreign people, don't let them just whatever. Do you feel like it'd be better to go with someone, not only for, with the memories and stuff, but for safety reasons? Or do you think that if you're just independently, just go on, just do it, bring pepper spray?
Well, the person, That's an idea. The person who talked to me about going and going the way that I did, she was a recent grad of UT, and she had really long blonde hair. And she said that as she traveled, she never had any issues whatsoever. But the farther south she got, and into Europe, the culture is a little bit different. It's more male dominated in a way, or patriarchal. And she did have a few people kind of follow her on trains, and she was kind of concerned about that. One time she got as dirty as she could, and her hair all up, and she hadn't taken a bath for a week, and still got followed. So there's always concern as a woman traveling alone, but I think that it's not prohibitive that you can still do it. You just have to have a network of people and know where you are, and know who you can contact. And now it's a lot easier with cell phones and things like that.
But if I get taken, you will go all Liam Neeson on them, right?
I'll be there.
Got you. Okay. Okay. So there's two things that you told me in the story that I always think is really funny. One thing, your diet. I always think that's hilarious.
Coca-Cola Mars bars.
Coca-Cola Mars bars, and also
well, actually, it's Coca-Cola's Mars bars, and whenever I could, it would be gyros, because they were very affordable street vendors, and the Greeks and the Turks are able to have food, and they spread it all over Europe, to where you don't have to. You can have the indigenous food, which is great, and I did that a few times, where you would go to a nice restaurant, but on a budget, you can only do that maybe once every week and a half, and I would do it once every week and a half, but all those meals, all that traveling, you need some sustenance, and so Mars bars and Coca-Cola really did the trick.
Is Mars bars kind of like Snickers kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, also, there was that one night you had to sleep in a haystack?
Yes. One thing about traveling with no, I didn't have a backpack, that's right. Okay, traveling with the really ridiculous luggage that I had.
Walking around with your suitcase.
And you're also, you're counting your money all the time, so I was thinking, well, I don't want to cash a check, because if I do, then I'll wind up spending it tonight. This was, traveler's check days, so I was like, I'm not going to cash one until tomorrow morning, and and I had enough money that night to go from Edinburgh to Berwick-upon-Tweed, and I was going to hitchhike to where I was going to stay next, and I didn't know where it was, so I started walking and hitchhiking and walking and hitchhiking. And after about 5, 6, 7, 8 miles, all of a sudden it got dark, and it's like nothing. So you look around, and being so much shy, and not, I saw this farmhouse, and I should have, I think about it now, and now I'm much more, social. But then I was like a little bit shyer, so I was like, well, I should go to that farmhouse, knock on the door, and say, hey, but I didn't. There was a haystack in their side fields, so I kind of made a little bed there and slept in the haystack all night. I had the weirdest dreams. I'll never forget the dreams about lions and tigers chewing on your shoulder, mainly because it was so uncomfortable. It just hurt so much. But woke up the next morning, was like, oh, I'm alive. That's great. Brush off the hay and...
Well, that's a plus. I'm alive, it's all good.
Yeah, so then you start hitchhiking again, another 3 or 4 miles. You're like, what is it? Because I've never had any problems. I mean, usually it's that, stop, picked up. So this one guy finally stopped. I remember he's in some weird British Leyland funky sports car that would never fly in this country. But he stopped and said, hey, he said, you're lucky I'm stopping for you, because no one ever stops on this road. I don't know why, but it's no hitchhiking. And I was like, I didn't read that in my let's go. So he takes me to the next town, and finally I can cash a traveler's check and have a little bit of money, but I wound up going all the way back to London that day. But that was the haystack story.
And anything, other little weird, quirky things that happened on the trip, or was it basically kind of just pretty chill?
There was all sorts of odd, quirky things. My friend that I met at UT, and he lived in England, he was a runner. Now I did running, but I wasn't more of a cyclist.
Like running.
So he was going to go for a run one day, and he's like, why don't you go with me? I'm like, okay. So it turns out I'd never run more than like a 10K at that point. and he's going to run a half marathon. He's going to run 13 miles that day. So, and, you run along, and you're young, so you're still in pretty good shape. So I'm running along, and finally the last mile and a half, he's like, well, I'm going to kick it in gear, and I'm like, I'm in the middle of Surrey. I have no idea where I am. I have got to stay with him. So I think I did my personal best mile, that last mile, just so I could stay with him so I wouldn't get lost, which was a 5:14.
That's very impressive.
And I've never even come close to that since then. But
you have to have that motivation,
Yeah, motivation.
It's not get lost in some foreign little town thing place.
Yes.
So.
And there's as she knows, because one night we're driving back from the Grand Canyon. We're driving to West Texas, and we needed to get her to a quinceañera the next day and we had to get back, so I had to drive all night because I decided to take him on the scenic route back through Colorado, and so
scenic route is always the longest route. Don't let
your
parents take you the scenic route.
Way long.
It's beautiful. It's longer. Just give them a highway.
So we have to get back to Dallas by I think 10 the next morning, and it was 7:30 at night, and we're still in Colorado, so it's like we got to drive all night. So I told her the story of my trip to Europe to keep me awake.
Didn't keep me awake.
Well, she was somewhat amused by it, but I told her many of these same things. But yeah.
I just thought it was an interesting story.
But it was the first time I ever took 5-hour energy. There was my little promotion. That stuff works, because I am getting in a car behind the wheel. I am so sleepy, but that kept me awake.
Should have had a little bit. Could have kept the story going.
Well, that's true.
It's interesting. It's a good story. But you recommend? It'd be good to study abroad. Everyone always regrets it in high school or in college.
Well, they'll regret it. And when you're young is the best time to go, because I used to go travel all the time, and now that I have kids, now it's like I can't afford to take you, because I could go by myself maybe, but then I feel guilty that she can't go, so I don't go.
You better not go anywhere without taking me. Oh, I'm just gonna go on a vacation, microwave dinner for the next week.
Yeah, that's why we went to the Grand Canyon last year and hiked down to the bottom.
And he brought a humongous backpack, because he finally learned that you need to bring a backpack, but he didn't learn what kind, so it was so heavy. We all took turns carrying it, then we all took turns carrying my brother.
Only for a mile. He only slept for a mile.
He slept for a mile.
He walked the rest of it. Anyway, that's the story. Study abroad. It's worth going to debt for study abroad. A lot of college.
Debt is bad, though.
Debt is bad, but if you can swing that little bit extra for study abroad, it's definitely the way to go.
So you think it's worth it? Not what about when us kids are grown up? Then you can just retire, if you can retire, if the world doesn't go to, apocalyptic chaos.
Everybody thinks it's going to go to apocalyptic chaos, but
2012 didn't happen. Just kidding. But do you think that you also want to go? You think you could have waited until retirement, or do you think?
Oh no, when you're young is good, because it's things that fill your memory, fill your awareness, fill your worldview for the rest of your life. You don't want to be 50, 60, 70 years old and then go, oh, that's what the world's like. You want to know what it's like when you're young, so that you can then apply that to the rest of your life, your thinking, and
do you really feel like your trip through Europe really changed your perspective?
Well, when I was in high school, I was a Republican, and I'm not a Republican anymore. So.
In Europe?
Well, because of that and other experiences, but.
Were you Republican because of family, because of the way that your family was, and your parents were Republicans, so you're well?
Well, not really. You're fiscal responsibility is always good, and. Of course, the Republican Party is a lot different now than it was then, because of the social issues. As you become aware of other cultures and other places in the world, all of a sudden you realize that and it's like Miguel, he loves this country, and what he loves about this country is opportunity, and that you can overcome much easier than you can other places. The problem with Europe and many other places in the world is it's still a caste system. Of course, India a caste system, but there are people in England that do not rise out of their social strata, because it just doesn't allow you to. And this country has fallen a little bit into that, but you're still able to, with education and with willingness to work and things of that sort, you're able to change who you are and what you're going to do and what you're going to become.
Be able to like rise out of your social status, like I'm pretty sure it was Carnegie, whatever his name is.
Carnegie.
You learn that in Zealous. Got you. You learn stuff.
Okay.
I think that's 10 minutes. I appreciate you talking to me, Dad. Thank you. So that's so
Very
formal.
good.
Thank you. Hope this turns off.